James Cole leaned back on the leather bar stool at the Ritz-Carlton, the dim golden light reflecting off the expensive whiskey he kept swirling in his hand. Outside the tall window, Central Park was a blur of city lights and November wind. His iPhone buzzed nonstop with work notifications, but he ignored them. Tonight, he had a different kind of power to savor. Brooke Sanders, his mistress, crossed her legs slowly, her black dress hugging her like it was tailored for sin. "So what are you going to do about her?" she whispered, brushing her perfectly manicured finger along the rim of her glass. James exhaled sharply, jaw tightening. "She thinks she can walk out. She thinks she can take my son." He laughed, low and bitter. "Hannah has no idea who she married." Brooke tilted her head. "You shouldn't let her control the narrative. She's unstable. You said she cried for hours last week just because the baby had a fever." "When?" "That's postpartum anxiety," James said coldly. "I've already sent the evaluator what they need. One bad report, and the court will hand me the baby without hesitation." Brooke's smile widened. "You're really doing it." He leaned closer. "I'm taking the baby." She froze for a second, then let out a small, excited breath. "James, that changes everything." "Exactly," he said. "Once Liam is with me full-time, she'll sign whatever I put in front of her." Brooke touched his arm. "And our future?" James didn't hesitate. "It starts the moment I bring him home." He finished his whiskey in one swallow and signaled for the bill. "I'm going back tonight. I'm done waiting. Hannah will never see this coming." He grabbed his coat, tossed a careless kiss on Brooke's cheek, and walked out into the cold Manhattan night. The valet rushed to bring his Mercedes around, headlights cutting through the mist rising off the sidewalk. James slid behind the wheel, adrenaline tightening his grip on the steering wheel. A father taking his own baby from his wife. He knew the public might frown if they understood the truth. But they wouldn't, because he intended to shape the truth. He pictured Hannah at home, probably rocking Liam in the nursery, thinking James was across the city closing some deal. She always trusted him too much, held on to hope too long, believed too easily. As he drove through Columbus Circle, the anger that had been simmering for months boiled over. "She pushed me," he muttered to himself. "She made this happen." Traffic lights flashed across his face, green, yellow, red like warnings he refused to see. He pressed harder on the gas. He imagined the moment he'd walk into the nursery, pick up Liam, and walk out. No discussion, no compromise, just raw authority. He smiled, but when the elevator doors opened at his building and he strode toward the nursery, something felt off. The silence was too still, too perfect, too empty. He opened the nursery door and instantly felt the ground drop beneath him. Before Hannah Turner became Hannah Cole, she was the kind of woman people instantly trusted. A 7-year-old pediatric nurse with soft brown eyes, steady hands, and a gentleness that made frightened children relax as soon as she entered the room. She lived in a tiny walk-up in Queens with a roommate, juggling long shifts, cheap takeout, and student loans. Her life wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, simple, and full of purpose. She never imagined that love, unexpected, glittering, overwhelming, would pull her into a world she didn't belong to. She first met James under harsh fluorescent lights in the hospital hallway. His nephew had pneumonia, and James paced back and forth like a man who couldn't afford to lose anything. He wasn't the polished, sharp-jawed CEO he later became. He was a guy in a hoodie, clutching a coffee, eyes red from worry. Hannah talked him through every step, kept him calm, even stayed late after her shift to check on the child again. When his nephew finally stabilized, James looked at her like she had performed a miracle. "You saved him," he said. "I did my job," she answered. But the way he looked at her, steady, grateful, warm, was something she wasn't used to. Over the following weeks, James found excuses to stop by the hospital. He brought coffee for the nurses, lingered near the pediatric floor, and always found a moment to talk to Hannah. She tried to laugh it off. "You don't owe me anything," she told him. But he seemed drawn to her earnestness, like it was something rare in the world he lived in. When he finally asked her to dinner, she almost said no, not because she wasn't interested, but because she already sensed the danger of a man like him, ambitious, confident, driven by something she didn't fully understand. But then he smiled, nervous and genuine, and she surprised herself by saying yes. Their dates were modest at first. walking through Central Park with hot chocolate, sharing cheap pasta at a neighborhood place, talking about childhood dreams. Hannah told him she wanted to become a pediatric specialist someday. James admitted he was building a small tech startup but didn't know if it would survive another year. They were two people trying to climb their own mountains, finding comfort in each other's presence. Then everything changed. James's company landed a major investment. Suddenly, his life accelerated: new office, new clients, new money. And he wanted Hannah beside him for all of it. He bought her flowers, took her to nicer places, upgraded her phone, so she could FaceTime easier after long shifts. It felt flattering, intoxicating even. No one had ever cared for her like that. But slowly, almost invisibly, he began pulling her away from her world. "You work too much. You're exhausted. I can provide for both of us. Why don't you take a break?" Words that sounded loving on the surface but carried another meaning underneath. When he proposed private dinner on a rooftop in Manhattan, soft jazz playing, a Tiffany ring glimmering under the lights, Hannah felt like she was stepping into a fairy tale. She didn't see the shadows waiting behind the promise. After the wedding, he convinced her to quit nursing, just for a little while. She agreed because she believed him, because she believed in them. But the moment she stepped into the role of a full-time wife in a luxury apartment overlooking the skyline, her world began shrinking. She didn't notice it at first. Love makes people overlook the small cracks. And in Hannah's new life, the cracks were everywhere. She just hadn't looked closely enough yet. Until something happened that forced her to see everything she'd been ignoring. When James's startup exploded into success, the transformation of their world happened so quickly, Hannah barely had time to breathe, let alone understand what it meant for her life. One month he was working from a cramped Soho office with mismatched furniture, and the next he was closing deals on Park Avenue, photographed beside venture capital giants, his name flashing across business blogs like he had been born for the spotlight. Then came the apartment. He brought her to see it on a breezy Sunday afternoon. A luxury high-rise on the Upper West Side, glass walls stretching from floor to ceiling, and a view of the Manhattan skyline that made the whole city look like it was bowing at their feet. The realtor kept talking about imported marble, heated floors, and smart home systems synced to a wall-mounted iPad, but Hannah barely heard any of it. She just stood by the window, looking out at the glittering maze of streets below, feeling like she'd stepped into someone else's life. James slipped his arm around her waist. "This is where our family will grow," he whispered. "This is where your world gets bigger." She smiled, because she wanted to believe him. Boxes from Amazon arrived, daily decor, appliances, sleek organizers James insisted they needed. Delivery people rolled in furniture wrapped in plastic, lighting fixtures that looked like they belonged in a museum, and a dining table so glossy Hannah hesitated to place anything on it. She went from a second-hand couch in Queens to choosing between Dior and crate and barrel for nursery decor. The contrast was dizzying. At first, she embraced it. She told herself she was lucky, blessed, chosen. She folded new sheets while sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors. She brewed coffee in the stainless steel machine James bought, because she deserved the best. She wandered the apartment barefoot, trying to imagine what life would be like with a baby crawling across these floors. But the bigger the apartment became, the smaller her world felt. James worked constantly. Late nights turned into overnight trips. Calls during dinner turned into dinners without him entirely. He was physically present sometimes, but mentally, emotionally, he seemed to drift further away each month. And Hannah, with no job, no coworkers, no shifts to run to at 6 a.m., found herself sitting alone for long stretches of time, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic 6 stories below, and nothing else. She tried to fill the silence. She took long walks through Central Park, browsed bookstores on Columbus Avenue, lingered in front of baby clothes at boutique windows. She would come home with small items, soft blankets, tiny socks, a lullaby book, and place them carefully in the growing nursery, imagining the baby's laughter echoing through these quiet rooms. But loneliness seeped in, subtle and relentless. When James was home, he was distracted. When he kissed her, it felt rushed. When she told him about her day, he nodded but didn't listen. She felt like an accessory to his new world, something beautiful but unnecessary. Still, she held on to hope, because the nursery became her anchor, painted a soft cream, rocking chair by the window, a mobile shaped like tiny clouds. It was the only space that felt like hers. One evening, as she assembled a small wooden bookshelf, she found a receipt tucked into James's coat pocket. The Plaza Hotel bar, 2 drinks, late at night. She stared at the timestamp, confusion clouding her mind. He'd told her he was at a business dinner across town, a tiny crack in the image of their perfect life. She didn't ask him about it yet. Not that night. She was afraid of sounding insecure, afraid of ruining the fragile peace she was desperate to protect. Instead, she placed the receipt into a drawer and tried to forget. But the truth was already circling her like a shadow she couldn't escape. And soon, that shadow was going to swallow everything she thought she knew. Pregnancy was supposed to be the season Hannah finally felt cherished, supported, protected. She imagined gentle hands on her belly, midnight grocery runs when cravings hit, shared doctor appointments where James held her hand during ultrasound scans. But the reality of her pregnancy unfolded like a quiet storm, one that no one else seemed to hear but her. It began in small ways. James started missing appointments. At first, it was because of meetings, then investor calls, then unexpected emergencies. The excuses came so quickly she stopped believing they were excuses at all. They were choices that placed everything above her and the growing life inside her. At her 12-week scan, she sat alone in the waiting room, surrounded by couples whispering excitedly. A woman next to her leaned on her husband's shoulder, clutching the first photo of their baby like it was the most fragile treasure on earth. Hannah kept her hands folded in her lap, trying not to stare too long, trying not to imagine the empty seat beside her. When the doctor walked her through the ultrasound, Hannah smiled, nodded, asked questions, but the ache in her chest never left. The doctor printed the first blurry picture of Liam's tiny form and handed it to her with a warm smile. "Share this with the father," she said. Hannah tucked it into her purse and whispered, "I will," even though she knew James wouldn't look at it for more than 2 seconds. As months passed, her body changed. Her cravings grew unpredictable, her back ached, and the loneliness pressed down on her like a weight she couldn't shift. Nights became the hardest. She'd lie awake listening to the elevator hum, the faint sound of taxis far below, and wait for James's key in the door. Sometimes it came at 2 a.m., sometimes not at all. When he did come home, the smell of cologne, one she didn't recognize, clung to him longer than his presence ever did. If she asked about his day, he answered with a single sentence. If she asked where he'd been, he'd sigh deeply as though her questions were a burden. Her world shrank further after her first scare. She had been in the kitchen, slicing apples, when the room spun violently. Her vision flickered, her knees dropped, and she caught the edge of the counter just in time. Her heart pounded like it was trying to break free. She sat on the cold tile floor, gasping until the spinning stopped. When she finally reached her doctor, she learned her blood pressure was elevated, dangerously so. "Stress can affect your pregnancy," the doctor warned. "You need support at home." Support. The word felt foreign. At home, there was only silence. Hannah tried to tell James. She waited until after dinner, choosing her words carefully. "The doctor said I need to avoid stress." James didn't look up from his laptop. "Then relax." "I'm trying, but—" "Hannah." His voice sliced through her. "I'm under enough pressure. Don't add to it." She swallowed her fear. Her child kicked inside her, as if reminding her she wasn't completely alone. She spent many afternoons preparing the nursery, rubbing her belly and whispering promises to the tiny life growing within her. "I'm here," she murmured, "even if it feels like no one else is." She rocked slowly in the chair, imagining a future where love filled these walls instead of silence. But in the back of her mind, something darker simmered, an intuition she could no longer ignore. There were nights James didn't come home, days he didn't call, moments he recoiled when she touched him. The cracks in their marriage had grown into fractures, and Hannah sensed that something was coming, something she wasn't prepared for, something that would shatter the last illusions she held on to. Hannah remembered the night everything shifted subtly, quietly, yet unmistakably, like a curtain drawing back to reveal a truth she had been too tired, too hopeful, too trusting to see. It was James's product launch gala, hosted at the Plaza Hotel, where chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars and wealthy investors filled the ballroom with their self-satisfied laughter. Hannah was 7 months pregnant, swollen ankles hidden beneath a cream dress she'd chosen carefully, hoping to look polished enough to match James's polished world. She shouldn't have gone. Her doctor advised rest. Her gut whispered no. But James insisted. "You're my wife," he'd said, straightening his tie in the mirror. "You need to stand beside me. People expect it." So she went. The ballroom was loud, crowded, glamorous. Men in tailored suits held champagne flutes. Women wore dresses that cost more than Hannah's monthly student loan payments. Cameras flashed. Music swelled. It was everything James thrived in, and everything that made Hannah feel small. She had been standing near the dessert table, trying to balance a plate of fruit she wasn't hungry for, when James appeared with a woman she didn't recognize. Young, beautiful, confident in a way that felt rehearsed. Her blonde hair was neatly tucked behind one ear, her lips a sharp red, her demeanor too polished for someone Hannah had never seen before. "Hannah," James said, placing a hand on the woman's back. "This is Brooke Sanders. She's our new director of communications." 3. Brooke extended her hand, her smile too warm to be genuine. "It's so nice to finally meet you." Finally. That word snagged in Hannah's mind like a thorn. "James talks about you all the time," Brooke continued. "He says you're the reason he pushes himself." Very inspiring. James cleared his throat, a faint warning in his eyes, one Hannah recognized from arguments, not compliments. Brooke caught the signal and stepped slightly closer to him, like it was instinct. A buzzing sensation began in Hannah's chest. She watched them as they talked about marketing plans, upcoming events, and brand presence. She watched how Brooke leaned in whenever James spoke, how James didn't step away, how their conversation flowed with an ease Hannah hadn't shared with him in months. She saw the familiar spark in James's eyes, the one he once had when he looked at her. Now it belonged to someone else. When James excused himself to greet a few investors, Brooke lingered. "You must be exhausted," she said sweetly. "These events can be overwhelming, especially in your condition." Hannah's hand instinctively moved to her belly. "I'm managing." "That's good," Brooke chirped. "James needs stability around him right now. Everything is moving so fast for the company. He can't afford distractions." "Distractions." Hannah's throat tightened. "I'm his wife," she reminded gently. Brooke smiled, but her eyes glinted. "Of course." 1. Before Hannah could respond, a flashbulb went off. Photographers documenting James as he took the stage, his voice booming confidently through the ballroom. Hannah watched him perform, loved by a room full of strangers while ignoring the woman carrying his child. Halfway through his speech, Hannah stepped back from the crowd, seeking air. Her feet throbbed, her heart pounded with something she couldn't yet name. And then she saw it. Across the ballroom, tucked near the bar, Brooke lifted her phone. James leaned close, whispering something only she could hear. Brooke laughed softly, leaning into him. Their faces were inches apart. Hannah froze. It wasn't a romantic moment, but it was too close, too familiar, too intimate for colleagues. It was the kind of closeness that grows roots long before anyone admits it exists. Her stomach twisted painfully. When James returned to her side later, his smile was strained. "You okay? You look tired." "I'm fine," she whispered, but something inside her had cracked. As they drove home in the backseat of a black car, James scrolled through emails while Hannah stared out the window at the glowing skyline. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling Liam flutter. And for the first time, she wondered if she and her child were no longer safe in the life she'd built. Because Brooke wasn't just a colleague, she was a threat, and Hannah could feel it in her bones. It happened on a rainy Thursday night, the kind of night where the city felt muted, wrapped in a gray hush. Hannah was 8 months pregnant, exhausted from another long day of swollen ankles, restless worry, and trying to ignore the growing hollowness in her marriage. James had texted earlier saying he'd be working late again. No apology. No warmth. Just another cold sentence tossed in her direction. The apartment felt too big without him. Too cold. Too silent. She walked into the nursery and sat in the rocking chair, rubbing her belly. "It's just us tonight, Liam," she whispered. "Just us again." But as she rocked, something gnawed at her, an instinct she had been pushing down for weeks. It wasn't just Brooke's presence at the gala. It wasn't the missed appointments. It wasn't even the late nights. It was everything. The unanswered questions. The distant touch. The way he recoiled when she tried to hold him. The way he avoided being alone in the same room with her. Tonight, she couldn't push that feeling aside anymore. She stood up slowly and walked to the living room, where James had left his iPad on the couch earlier that morning. She hesitated. She had never gone through his things before. She never wanted to. Trust was supposed to be the foundation of their life. But trust only works when both people honor it. Her hands shook as she picked up the iPad. The screen lit up instantly. He hadn't even bothered to lock it. Notifications filled the screen. Emails, Slack messages. And then, a preview popped up. From Brooke. You always know how to calm me down. I miss you already. Hannah's breath caught. She tapped it open with trembling fingers. The message thread loaded, and the world she'd been clinging to collapsed in seconds. There were pictures. Dinner dates. Hotel hallways. Selfies of the two of them laughing, drinking, touching. Some were taken while Hannah was home, swollen and alone. Brooke, when she's out of the picture, everything will be easier. You, me, and the baby. Our fresh start. Our baby. Hannah pressed a hand to her mouth, barely holding back a sob. The room tilted. She scrolled further. James. She's too emotional to raise him. One evaluation, and I'll get full custody. Just be patient. Full custody. He wasn't only cheating. He was planning to take Liam. A sharp pain shot across her stomach, but she didn't know if it was physical or emotional. She curled forward, gripping the iPad as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the floor. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't a mistake. This was a betrayal crafted with intention. Her vision blurred as she continued reading. Brooke had sent a photo of a hotel room, the same cologne scent Hannah had noticed on James's clothes. Another message. We could be perfect if she'd just disappear. You deserve a partner who supports you. James replied. She's become dead weight. Once Liam is with me, she'll have nothing to bargain with. Hannah's knees buckled. She sank onto the couch, tears hitting the screen, mixing with the horror staring back at her. He didn't love her. He didn't respect her. He didn't even see her as the mother of his child. He saw her as an obstacle. Her breaths came in sharp, broken gasps. She felt panic rising hot, choking, unstoppable. Her baby kicked hard, reacting to her distress. I'm sorry, she whispered to her son. I'm so sorry. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater, trying to steady herself. The room felt colder now. The whole apartment seemed foreign. Like she was living in a stranger's home. She knew she had to do something. She just didn't know what yet. But one thing was clear, this was no longer about heartbreak. This was about survival. For her. For Liam. For the future James intended to steal from them. And somewhere deep inside her, beneath all the fear, something fierce flickered to life. A mother's resolve. And that resolve would soon change everything. Hannah waited until the next morning to confront him. Not because she needed time to calm down, there was no calming the storm inside her, but because she needed to breathe, to steady her shaking hands, to remind herself she wasn't imagining what she saw. When James finally walked through the door near sunrise, smelling faintly of whiskey and expensive cologne, she felt something inside her crack so deep she wondered if she would ever be whole again. He didn't look at her when he entered. He tossed his keys on the counter, loosened his tie, and poured himself a glass of water like he was the one who had suffered through a sleepless night. You're home late, she said quietly. He froze for half a second. Then his shoulders stiffened. Work. 10. The lies sat between them like smoke. Hannah stepped closer, holding the iPad to her chest. We need to talk. About what? He asked, still not meeting her eyes. About Brooke. That made him look up. His expression didn't show guilt. It showed annoyance. Like she had interrupted an important meeting. Hannah, don't start. She unlocked the iPad and held up the screen. The photos. The messages. The betrayal in plain sight. His jaw flexed once. Only once. You went through my things? That's what you care about, she whispered. Not this? She waved the iPad, her hand trembling. Not the fact that you're planning a future with another woman while I'm carrying your child? James didn't flinch. You're overreacting. Overreacting? You told her you're taking our baby. He rolled his eyes. You're emotional, pregnant. You're reading things out of context. There is no context where this is okay. Her voice broke. You said I'm dead weight. You said I'm unstable. You plan to take Liam from me. He finally snapped. Because you are unstable, Hannah. Look at you. Crying all the time. Falling apart over nothing. You can barely take care of yourself, let alone a baby. Her throat tightened. I'm pregnant, James. I'm supposed to be emotional. It's more than that, and you know it. He stepped closer, towering over her. You need help. Real help. And if you keep acting like this, I will make sure the court sees that. Pardon. Fear surged through her veins. Are you threatening me? With my own child? Her voice quivered. After what you've done? James let out a cold, humorless laugh. Don't be dramatic. I'm protecting our son. By tearing him away from his mother? By keeping him with the parent who's capable, he snapped. You have no income, no stability. You quit your job. You depend on me for everything. A judge won't give you custody, not even shared. You won't win. Too. His words hit her like physical blows. He wasn't bluffing. He had thought this through, planned it, prepared for it. Hannah backed away, pressing her hand to her belly as Liam shifted inside her. I won't let you do this. You won't have a choice, he said sharply. You want to leave? Fine. But you're not taking my son. A chill washed over her. The future she feared was suddenly staring her in the face. She swallowed the rising panic. James, please. We can fix this. We can talk to a counselor. Just. He cut her off with a dismissive wave. I don't want to fix this. I want control. And I already have it. Those words, that tone, the final piece of truth falling into place. James didn't love her. James didn't respect her. James didn't even see her as a human being anymore. He saw her as leverage, a threat, a problem to eliminate. Hannah felt something shift inside her then, not panic, not shock, but something colder. A clarity she hadn't felt in months. A realization. He was never going to save her. She would have to save herself. And her son. She closed the iPad slowly and whispered, You will regret this. He smirked. We'll see. And in that moment, Hannah understood. The war had officially begun. Hannah didn't call her brother immediately. Pride held her back, along with years of subtle manipulation from James that convinced her Michael disapproved of their marriage. The distance between them wasn't real. James had manufactured it carefully, but Hannah had believed it anyway. Now, standing in the middle of her own living room with the taste of betrayal still burning on her tongue, she realized how isolated she'd become. That night, after James stormed out to clear his head, Hannah sank onto the couch, clutching a pillow to her chest. Her breathing was shallow, her heart racing, her baby twisting anxiously inside her. Every wall in the apartment felt hostile. Every shadow felt dangerous. She put a hand over her belly and whispered, I'm sorry, Liam. I should have protected us sooner. Her phone lay on the coffee table, screen dark. She stared at it for nearly 10 minutes, wrestling with fear, shame, exhaustion. Finally, she whispered, I need help, and unlocked it. She scrolled to Michael's number, the one she hadn't called in almost a year. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Then she pressed it. He answered on the second ring. Hannah? His voice was alert instantly, sharp with concern. Hey, is everything okay? And with that single question, everything inside her broke. She sobbed so hard she couldn't speak. The dam holding months of fear, isolation, and heartbreak gave way, flooding her until she was shaking. Hannah, he said, voice now firm and steady. I'm coming. Text me your address again just to be sure. I'll be there in 20. 20 minutes later, the elevator opened, and Michael stepped into the hallway, tall, clean-cut, wearing a dark coat soaked lightly from the rain. His eyes scanned Hannah's face the moment she opened the door. In 1 second, he understood more than she could have explained in hours. He pulled her into a tight embrace. Let's sit down, he murmured. Tell me everything. They sat at the dining table, city lights flickering through the windows. Hannah retold the nightmare, the affair, the threats, the custody plan, the manipulation. She showed him the messages, the photos, the evidence. She didn't spare any detail. She didn't have to. Michael's expression darkened with each revelation. "When did this start?" he asked quietly. "A while ago," she whispered, shame washing over her. "And you went through this alone?" He said you didn't want me calling you, that you were tired of mediating." Michael leaned back, stunned. "He told you that?" She nodded. His jaw clenched. "Hannah, I never said that. Not once. You're my sister. You could have called me any day, any hour." Tears spilled down her cheeks again. "I didn't know." "That's because he didn't want you to." Michael reached for her hand across the table. His voice was steady, calm, but beneath it was a steel Hannah hadn't heard in years. "Listen to me carefully. You're not crazy. You're not unstable. You're not alone. And you're not going to let that man take your son." Hannah looked down at her trembling hands. "But he has money, power, lawyers. He knows people." "I know people too," Michael cut in. "Better people, smarter people, people who actually care about justice." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You don't have to beat him head on. You just have to be smarter than him, and we will be." "But how?" she whispered. "We start slow," he said, quiet, invisible. "You don't let him know you've figured him out. You don't fight yet. Not until you're holding all the cards." He pulled a small notebook from his coat pocket and flipped it open. "We gather everything. Financial discrepancies, behavioral patterns, documentation, proof of neglect, proof of infidelity. You follow his movements. You stay calm. And when the time is right..." His eyes hardened. "We strike." Hannah inhaled shakily. "Michael, I'm scared." "You should be," he said honestly. "But he should be terrified." A flicker of strength rose in her chest, fragile, but real. For the first time in months, she didn't feel completely defenseless. Michael squeezed her hand. "He thinks he's already won, Hannah. That's his weakness." "And what's mine?" she whispered. "Your son," he said softly. "And that's exactly why you'll win." Hannah looked at the nursery door, her heart tightening with fierce protectiveness. Because he was right. A mother fighting for her child is the most unstoppable force on earth. And James was about to learn that the hard way. The next few days moved slowly, quietly, like the calm before a hurricane. Hannah felt different, still fragile, still aching, but something inside her had shifted. She woke each morning with a new purpose buzzing through her veins. James thought she was defeated. He believed his threats had crushed her. But underneath the exhaustion, there was a growing flame. One Michael had reignited the moment he walked through her door. She wasn't fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Liam. And that changed everything. Michael came by the following afternoon with groceries, prenatal vitamins, and a binder thick enough to rival a college textbook. The moment he placed it on the dining table, Hannah stared like it was a weapon she wasn't sure she knew how to wield. "What's this?" she asked. "Your insurance," he said simply. "Our leverage." Inside were labeled sections: finances, communications, behavioral incidents, witnesses, medical records, legal options. His handwriting filled page after page with notes, timelines, instructions. Hannah blinked. "You did all this overnight?" "I started the moment I left your apartment," he said. "This isn't just a marital fight. This is a tactical situation. James is planning something. You need to be 10 steps ahead, not 2. Tries." She swallowed a lump of fear and nodded. Their first task was evidence. That night, while James slept with his phone on the nightstand, Hannah quietly slipped into the living room, plugged in an old laptop, and began transferring every screenshot, message, photo she had saved. She uploaded them all to a hidden cloud account. Michael helped her set up one James could never track. She added timestamps, descriptions, receipts, hotel charges, even the dates he had missed appointments. She documented everything. Her hands shook at times, but each file she uploaded felt like another brick in the shield she was building. Next was surveillance. Michael helped her install discreet recording devices, not obvious cameras, but tiny audio recorders hidden in places James would never check. One behind a row of books, one near the kitchen counter, one inside an unused diaper box. If he yelled, threatened, manipulated, or slipped up in any way, they would have it recorded. "You're not bugging your home," Michael corrected when she hesitated. "You're protecting yourself." Then came the financial component. Michael coached her on identifying patterns, charges to luxury hotels, suspicious expenses covered by company accounts, dinners at odd hours. Hannah never realized how much she'd ignored over the past year: receipts in jacket pockets, late-night Ubers, company credit card statements he left out without thinking. She photographed everything and added it to the binder. "Why is this so important?" she asked. "Because if James tries to take Liam," Michael said calmly, "we'll prove in court that he's irresponsible with money, dishonest with investors, and morally compromised. Family court hates instability, and everything about him screams instability." The next step was emotional control. "You cannot let him see you're preparing," Michael warned. "You must act normal, predictable, kind, even. If he suspects anything, he'll accelerate his plan." Acting normal around James was torture. She forced herself to smile when he walked into the room, forced herself to accept his cold kisses, forced herself to pretend she was still the obedient, vulnerable wife he believed he could bully. But every moment around him made her stomach twist. Every word he spoke felt like poison. Every step he took felt like a threat. One evening, he caught her staring at him too long. "What?" he snapped. Hannah blinked softly. "Nothing. I'm just tired." He smirked, satisfied with that answer. "You should rest. You'll need energy when the baby comes." Energy. For what? The fight he thought she was too weak to win. Later that night, she stood in the nursery, hands on her belly. She whispered to Liam, "I won't let him take you. I promise." She didn't notice the shadow standing in the hallway, the shadow of a man who had no idea what storm was quietly building behind him. But soon, very soon, Hannah's silence would become James's greatest miscalculation. The night Hannah went into labor was nothing like she imagined. She pictured soft music, warm lights, James holding her hand, whispering that she could do this, that they were in it together. Instead, it began with a stab of pain that folded her over the edge of the bed and stole her breath. Her phone slipped from her hand as another contraction tore through her stomach. "Not yet," she gasped. "Please, not tonight." Of all nights, James wasn't home. He was meeting an investor. She knew better. Brooke had posted a photo on Instagram, just a shot of a wine glass with a Manhattan skyline behind it, but Hannah recognized the view. It was from the bar at the River Calf. James had taken her there once, years ago, when he still remembered what love felt like. Another contraction hit, harder, sharper, closer. Her instinct screamed, "Move. Now." She grabbed her hospital bag already packed for weeks and dialed 911 with trembling hands. The dispatcher talked her through the breathing, through the dizzying panic, until the paramedics arrived. They loaded her into the ambulance, their voices calm but urgent. The sirens wailed through the streets as the city lights streaked past the windows. Hannah clutched her belly, sweat dampening her hairline. "Liam," she whispered. "Please, stay with me." "So?" She kept checking her phone, hoping James would call, text, anything. Nothing, not even a missed notification. Her chest tightened with something worse than pain abandonment. But she couldn't afford to break. Not now. When she reached the Upper East Side Hospital, everything became a blur of bright lights, medical voices, and cold air. Nurses rushed her into a delivery room. Someone clipped monitors to her belly. Someone else checked her vitals. A doctor hovered near her feet. "Her blood pressure is rising," a nurse said. "It's the preeclampsia," the doctor replied. "We need to move quickly." Preeclampsia. The condition her doctor had warned about, the one James had brushed off as overreacting. A nurse squeezed Hannah's hand. "Do you want us to call the father?" Hannah swallowed hard. "I already tried." They nodded kindly, but she saw the pity in their eyes. Another contraction hit, and she screamed. A real, raw scream that tore through every piece of her. Her vision blurred. The room spun. Voices became muffled. Then, "Baby's heart rate is dropping. We need to prep for an emergency C-section." Hannah's breath froze. "No, no, please," she cried weakly. But the staff moved fast. They transferred her to another bed, rushed her toward the operating room. The ceiling lights flashed overhead like blinking stars she couldn't reach. She felt hands on her arms, her legs, her shoulders. Someone whispered, "You're going to be okay, Hannah." You're going to meet your baby." In that moment, she didn't care about James, didn't care about Brooke, didn't care about the betrayal, the loneliness, the plans he had made behind her back. All she cared about was hearing Liam cry, seeing his face, holding him long enough to tell him she loved him. The anesthesia blurred the edges of her fear. Her eyes fluttered. Her breathing slowed. Darkness crept in. When she woke, the room was dim, soft beeping, a warm weight on her chest. Liam, tiny, red, breathing steadily. In her arms, she sobbed deep, shaking sobs that soaked his blanket. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi, baby. Mommy's here." A nurse smiled at her. "He's perfect. Strong." He fought hard. Hannah brushed her finger along his cheek. "Just like I will." Hours passed before James finally appeared. He stepped into the room with the same cologne, the same pressed shirt, the same detached expression. He didn't ask if she was okay. Didn't ask what happened. He only asked, "Why didn't you call again?" She stared at him, a new kind of clarity settling over her, because she had just survived the hardest night of her life, and she had done it without him. Hannah returned home from the hospital with a stitched abdomen, swollen eyes, and a newborn who relied on her for every breath. The Upper West Side apartment, once breathtaking, once a symbol of a life she hoped she was building, now felt like a beautifully decorated trap. Every gleaming surface mocked her. Every soft lamp cast shadows she didn't feel safe in. And every room reminded her of the man who abandoned her during the moment she needed him most. James acted as if nothing unusual had happened. He carried the hospital bag inside, set it on the couch, and immediately pulled out his phone. "I need to jump on a call," he muttered. Hannah blinked at him. "Right now. It'll be quick." It wasn't. He disappeared into his office with the glass walls overlooking the skyline, leaving her in the foyer holding a crying newborn she'd just risked her life to bring into the world. Her stitches burned. Her arms trembled. She sank into a chair and tried to rock Liam, her body screaming for rest. When she finally got him to settle, she limped toward the kitchen. A mountain of unopened packages sat by the counter. Amazon boxes, luxury baby gifts from James's investors, Dior-branded wrapping paper, gifts meant to impress, not support. She stared at a robotic baby bassinet James had bought without asking her. It cost more than her old monthly salary. But what she needed wasn't an expensive gadget. She needed a partner. That night, Liam cried nonstop. His tiny lungs released hours of helpless wails that echoed through the apartment like alarms. Hannah's milk hadn't come in yet. She was in pain stitches pulling, back aching, head spinning from hormonal crashes and sleeplessness. She tried skin-to-skin contact, rocking him, warm cloths, humming old lullabies. Nothing worked. Finally, desperate and shaking, she knocked on James's office door. "Can you help me, please? Just hold him for a minute." He didn't even pause his typing. "You're the mom, Hannah. This is your job." "He won't stop crying. I need Dorda." James muted his call, shot her a glare, and hissed. "Put him in the bassinet. That's what it's for. He needs comfort. He needs routine," James snapped. "Don't coddle him." A fresh wave of pain hit her chest, not physical, but deep, sharp, emotional. She clutched Liam tighter. "James, I almost died giving birth to him. And I said I appreciate that," he replied coldly, "but I can't be everything right now. I have a company to run. You need to adjust." Adjust. As if motherhood were a switch she could flip. As if sacrifice were a language only she had to speak. He returned to his meeting. She returned to the nursery alone, bleeding, trembling. Over the next weeks, the distance grew into a chasm. James came home later. He slept in the guest room to get rest for work. He criticized her appearance, her housekeeping, her emotional state. "You're too sensitive. You're making the baby clingy. You're not organized. You're letting yourself go." Every word chipped away at what remained of her spirit. One afternoon, when Liam was 5 weeks old, Hannah tried to shower for the first time in 2 days. She placed him in the crib, turned on the warm water, and inhaled steam that felt almost like relief, until a faint cry pierced through the bathroom door. She rushed out, slipping on the tile, stitches screaming. She found a note taped to the crib, written in James's sharp handwriting. "If you can't handle a 10-minute shower without falling apart, How can you handle full custody? Her legs buckled. He wasn't trying to help her adjust. He was building a case. Every cruel comment, every refusal to help, every twisted manipulation. It all made sense now. He was documenting her weakness. He was pushing her to break. He wanted her to fail. So he could take Liam. Hannah sank into the rocking chair, clutching her baby, tears falling onto his tiny forehead. But beneath the grief, another emotion stirred hot, fierce, and undeniable. Anger. Not wild anger. Not desperate anger. But focused, powerful, mother's anger. The kind that builds an army out of one woman and her child. The kind that destroys men like James. And for the first time, Hannah understood something clearly. This wasn't just a marriage ending. This was a war she was learning how to win. The breaking point didn't arrive with shouting or flying objects. It came quietly, wrapped in calm cruelty, more dangerous than rage could ever be. It was a late Sunday morning, sunlight spilling across the marble floors as if the apartment were pretending to be peaceful. Hannah had barely slept. Liam had been fussy all night. Her stitches still ached. Her mind felt frayed from exhaustion. But she was trying. She stood at the kitchen island, gently bouncing Liam in her arms while warming a bottle. Her robe hung loosely around her, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She didn't look put together. She looked like a new mother, soft, tired, and human. James walked in wearing a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled up like he had somewhere important to be. He grabbed a mug from the cabinet and poured himself coffee. "You need to clean up in here," he said without greeting her. "It looks chaotic." Hannah's jaw tightened. "I've been up all night. I'm doing the best I can." "Well, your best isn't enough." He took a long sip from his coffee, surveying her with critical eyes. "I talked to a family counselor yesterday. He agrees you're showing signs of postpartum instability." Her heart stopped. "You talked to a counselor? About me?" "I'm thinking ahead, Hannah. For Liam's sake, this environment isn't healthy." She swallowed hard. "This environment is unhealthy because you're never here." He laughed under his breath. "There you go again. Dramatic, emotional, blaming me." He set down his mug and stepped toward her. "You need to be more realistic." "Realistic," she whispered. "About custody." Liam squirmed in her arms, sensing her panic. James lowered his voice into something cold and factual, as if he were delivering a quarterly report. "If you leave this marriage, the baby stays with me." Hannah staggered back, nearly dropping the bottle. "What?" "You heard me." He reached for his blazer, draped over a chair. "You can leave, Hannah. I won't stop you. But Liam stays in this apartment. With me." Her heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy. "You can't do that. You can't take him from me." "I don't have to take him," he said with a shrug. "You'll lose him on your own. You're mentally unstable, financially dependent, physically weak. A judge will see that. Everyone will." She shook her head, clutching Liam closer. "I'm his mother. And I'm the capable parent," he replied smoothly. "The one with income, the one with resources, the one who isn't falling apart every 5 minutes." "I'm not falling apart," she said through shaking breaths. "You're unraveling," he corrected, "and you know it." Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You're doing this on purpose. You're trying to break me." "Trying?" he repeated with a cold smile. "Hannah, you show up broken." She sucked in a sharp breath. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Because you're in my way," he said simply. "And Brooke thinks." He stopped too late. Hannah froze. "Brooke thinks what?" James's eyes flickered panic, then irritation. "We're done with this conversation." "No," she said, voice rising for the first time. "Finish. What does Brooke think?" "That you're not fit to raise a child," he snapped. "And she's right. You can barely function." There it was. The truth. Said out loud. The weapon he'd been sharpening for months. He grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door. "I'm going to the office. Try not to fall apart while I'm gone." He left. The door clicked shut with a finality that echoed in her chest. Hannah stood in the kitchen, trembling, her son pressed against her heart. Every word he said rang in her ears like a fire alarm. Not because she believed him, but because she finally understood. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It wasn't even a rivalry. It was a kidnapping plan wrapped in legal threats. And she was done being prey. She lifted Liam closer and whispered, "I will never let him take you. Not while I'm breathing." And somewhere deep in her soul, a line was drawn. James had declared war, and Hannah was no longer afraid to fight back. The day after James delivered his cold threat, "If you leave, the baby stays," Hannah woke feeling like a different woman. Still exhausted, still aching, still fragile, but also burning with a kind of clarity she had never felt before. Fear hadn't disappeared. It had transformed into purpose. If she wanted to protect Liam, she couldn't wait for James to strike. She needed to move first. So she called Michael. He arrived within the hour, stepping into the apartment with the brisk confidence of someone who had dealt with monsters before. He looked around the immaculate living room, the glass walls, the polished floors, the silent coldness that filled the space. "This place feels like a museum," he muttered. "A very expensive one. No warmth at all." Hannah sank onto the couch, cradling Liam. He threatened to take him. He said, "I'd lose in court." "Pause?" Michael's jaw flexed, not with surprise, but with confirmation. "I figured he'd do that eventually." "You knew." "I've seen men like James before," he said. "They don't explode, they erode. They chip away at the people around them until everyone is too tired to fight." Hannah lowered her eyes. "What do I do?" "You don't confront him again," Michael said firmly. "You prepare, quietly, methodically. We build a plan he'll never see coming." 1. He pulled a leather folder from his bag, sleek, organized, terrifyingly professional. He set it on the coffee table. "This," he said, "is our war map." Inside were printed documents, names of attorneys, investigative leads, custody statutes, tactical notes, timelines, and highlighted strategies. It wasn't a simple binder this time. It was a blueprint that could take down a man far more powerful than Hannah ever realized. "Here's what we're going to do," Michael began, flipping to the first page. "Step 1, residency." "Residency?" she echoed. "Legally, where the child resides the majority of the time matters," he explained. "If James tries to file for emergency custody, he'll use this apartment as proof that his home is the stable environment." "Isn't that true?" she whispered. "Only if you stay," Michael said. "But if you and Liam leave and establish residency elsewhere, even temporarily, his argument weakens." She swallowed. "Where would we go?" "My place," he said without hesitation. "Or a safe rental I've already lined up in the Hamptons. Under your name, not his." Her breath caught. "You already found a place?" "Let's just say I've been preparing for the day you called." She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "Step 2, he continued, documentation. You need to log every threat, every neglectful action, every recording from the devices we installed. And you need to write down your medical complications, preeclampsia, the emergency C-section, his absence. Judges care about postpartum support, or lack of it." She nodded, blinking rapidly. "Okay. Step 3. Finances. I need you to open a separate bank account. Today, I don't care if it's $50. It shows independence. But James monitors." "He doesn't monitor me," Michael said. "I'll transfer funds from an account he can't trace." Her throat tightened. "You're risking a lot for us." "You're my sister," he said simply. "That's not a risk, that's a duty." She wiped her eyes. "Step 4, he said, pointing to the next page, timing. You leave only when James is gone for at least 48 hours. I checked his travel schedule. He has a 2-day trip to San Francisco next month. That's likely our window." "A month?" she whispered. "I know," he said, "but you need time to recover physically, to gather evidence, to make copies of documents he doesn't know you know exist." Hannah looked down at her son, sleeping peacefully against her chest. "What if he figures it out early?" Michael's eyes sharpened. "Then we accelerate. But we must stay ahead. James plans his moves like a CEO. We have to plan like survivors." A chill swept through her. Not fear, determination. "And step 5?" she asked. Michael leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Step 5 is the exit. When he's gone, I'll come with a car. You take Liam, only essentials. Leave everything else behind. The goal isn't packing. The goal is disappearing before he realizes you've outplayed him." She inhaled shakily. "And after that," he said, We file the divorce and we hit him with every piece of evidence you've collected." Hannah exhaled, long and trembling. This wasn't just a plan. It was freedom. "And Hannah," Michael added, placing a steadying hand on hers. "Once we start this, there's no turning back." Her heart thudded, slow and heavy. "I know," she whispered. "And you're sure? You're ready?" She looked at Liam, then back at Michael. Her voice was steady when she answered, "I'm ready." And with that, the first true step toward escaping her golden prison began. The night Hannah finally left didn't arrive with chaos. It came in silence eerily calm, like the pause before lightning breaks open the sky. James had flown to San Francisco that morning for a 2-day investor summit. Hannah watched him wheel his suitcase to the door, watched him adjust his Rolex, watched him kiss the air near her cheek, as if performing for an invisible camera. "I'll check in later," he said. She only nodded. The door clicked shut, and for a moment the apartment felt too still to breathe in. Hannah stood in the center of the living room, Liam balanced on her shoulder. He cooed softly, unaware that everything around him was about to change forever. She inhaled deeply, her hands trembling not from fear this time, but from urgency. She had 48 hours, maybe less. James had a habit of surprising her, and she no longer believed his trips always lasted as long as he claimed. Michael texted, "I'm downstairs. Elevator cameras disabled for the next 10 minutes. Move now." Her pulse quickened. She placed Liam gently in his carrier, securing the straps with shaking fingers. "You're coming with me, sweetheart," she whispered. "We're going somewhere safe." She grabbed the diaper bag she'd repacked 100 times formula. Bottles, pacifiers, a soft blanket, 2 changes of clothes, her medical records, and a folder of documents Michael said she could not forget. Her stomach twisted as she looked at the nursery one last time. The cream-painted walls, the rocking chair where she'd cried more nights than she could count, the perfectly arranged toys James never touched. She wasn't sad to leave the apartment. She was sad that she had ever believed it represented a real family. A final sweep of the room revealed something she had almost forgotten: the small brown teddy bear she'd bought months ago. The one she'd held during nights she feared she'd never be enough for her son. She tucked it into the carrier beside Liam. Then she stepped into the hallway. Her knees nearly buckled. Not from fear, from how real this moment suddenly felt. Escape wasn't theory anymore. Escape was happening. She pressed the elevator button, heart thudding as the doors opened. The security camera above the panel was dark, just as Michael promised. She stepped in. The elevator descended slowly, each floor number glowing like a countdown. When the doors slid open, Michael stood in the lobby wearing a dark hoodie, a baseball cap, and the cold, focused expression of someone ready for war. His black SUV idled outside. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she whispered. "But I'm ready." "Then let's move." He grabbed her suitcase, just one, packed only with essentials, and held the door as she hurried into the cold night air. The city felt different, louder, sharper. As if the world knew she was running. They loaded the car quickly. Michael checked over his shoulder twice. Hannah felt her pulse in her throat. When they pulled onto the street, Hannah didn't look back. She couldn't. If she turned around, she feared she'd collapse. Not because she wanted to stay, she didn't, but because everything she had endured was stitched into those walls. Leaving felt like ripping out the last thread. Halfway across the bridge, Liam began to whimper. Hannah leaned over, stroking his tiny head, whispering soothing words. Michael glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "You're doing the right thing," he said. "This is the smartest move you've made." She exhaled shakily. "He's going to lose his mind when he finds the house empty." Michael didn't soften. "Good," he said. "Let him lose something for once." They drove for nearly 2 hours until the city lights faded behind them. The quiet roads of the Hamptons welcomed them with a different kind of silence, one that didn't feel dangerous. When Michael pulled up to the small rented beach house, Hannah stepped out and inhaled the cool ocean air. It smelled like freedom. Inside, the lights were warm, the room small but cozy, so unlike the cold luxury she'd left behind. She placed Liam on the bed, watching him stretch his tiny fingers. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of peace. A fragile peace, one that would shatter soon. Because back in Manhattan, the timer had already begun. James would return. James would discover the empty nursery. James would understand he'd been outplayed. But not yet. For tonight, Hannah allowed herself to breathe. She had escaped the cage, but the real battle was only just beginning. James Cole was a man who rarely lost control, at least not in public. Image was everything to him. Reputation, power, the illusion of perfection. But that night, sitting at the polished mahogany bar inside the Ritz-Carlton overlooking Central Park, he looked like someone trying to outrun a storm that was already catching up to him. Brooke arrived in a black dress that clung to her like ambition. She slid onto the bar stool beside him, crossing her legs with slow confidence. "You look tense," she purred. James rubbed a hand over his face. "It's been a long trip. Business trip or wife escape trip?" He gave her a thin smile. "Both." "Two." Brooke ordered a drink, then leaned closer. "So how did she take it?" "You told her, right? That you and I didn't spell everything out," James muttered. "She's too emotional right now." Emotional was his favorite excuse. It let him dismiss anything that didn't fit his narrative. Brooke rolled her eyes. "James, she's always emotional. She's weak." James didn't disagree. "You know what the problem is," Brooke continued, swirling her wine. "She's holding you back. And now that the baby's here, she thinks she has leverage." That struck a nerve. "She doesn't," James snapped. "I control the finances. I control the apartment. She doesn't have a job. She doesn't have a lawyer. She doesn't even leave the house." Brooke leaned back, satisfied. "So what's the plan?" He hesitated for a moment, then the whiskey loosened his tongue. "I'm taking the baby." Brooke's eyebrows lifted. "You're what?" "I've already spoken to the evaluator," James said flatly. "She cries constantly, can't manage the household, and had a meltdown in the hospital. They'll write her up as unstable. Judges don't give newborns to unstable mothers." Brooke bit her lip, not from concern. From excitement. From victory. "So Liam will live with you." "With us," was the unspoken finish. James nodded once. "When I get home tonight, I'm taking him. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. And if she doesn't, then I'll bury her in court." Brooke smirked. "That's the James I know." He downed another drink, anger tightening his jaw. "She thinks she can just leave. She thinks she gets to take my son." His voice grew harder. "But she won't. She can't." Brooke gently stroked his arm. "You don't owe her anything, James. She's dead weight. You're building an empire." He liked hearing that. It fed the part of him that needed superiority the way others needed air. "I'll give her a small settlement if she cooperates." "Enough to keep her quiet," he said. "But Liam stays with me." Brooke's smile widened. "And then what?" "Then," James said, his eyes darkening with certainty, "you and I start fresh. No secrets. No baggage. A real family." The bartender returned with their drinks. James lifted his glass, toasting silently to his own brilliance. He didn't know his empire was seconds away from collapsing. He didn't know Hannah had been preparing her own war map. He didn't know she was already gone. And he definitely didn't know that by the time he reached the nursery, the crib would be empty. Brooke rested her chin on her hand. "So, when do you take him?" James stood up, adjusting his jacket. "Tonight." He kissed her recklessly, carelessly, in full view of anyone who cared to notice, and walked out into the cold Manhattan night. The wind whipped against his face, but he didn't feel it. He felt powerful, untouchable, victorious. He handed his ticket to the valet. The Mercedes pulled up. He slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel with certainty. "This is my house," he muttered. "My son, my future." Traffic lights flashed across his face. The city pulsed around him. He drove home ready to claim what he believed was his. But when he opened the nursery door, the silence waiting for him was not victory. It was devastation. James Cole expected triumph. He expected the moment he stepped into the nursery to feel like the closing act of a flawless plan. He expected the soft glow of the nightlight, the scent of baby powder, the sight of Liam sleeping peacefully, ready to be carried into the future he had crafted without Hannah's consent. But the moment he pushed open the door, everything inside him froze. The room was silent. Too silent. The nightlight was on, casting a warm glow over walls painted in soft cream. The mobile above the crib swayed gently from the draft he'd created entering. But the crib was empty. No blankets. No stuffed toys. No baby. Just a hollow space where a child should have been. James blinked once, twice, as if his brain refused to compute what his eyes clearly saw. Then he yanked the curtains aside, searching the corners of the room, the changing table, the closet. Nothing. "Liam?" he called, disbelief cracking his voice. "Hannah?" Only silence answered. He stormed down the hallway, checking the master bedroom, bathroom, laundry room, even the balcony, as if Hannah might somehow be standing out there holding their child in the freezing air. Empty. 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 His breath quickened. His pulse hammered. A hot, unfamiliar panic crawled under his skin. "Hannah!" He barked louder. "Enough. Stop playing games." He threw open the guest room door. Still nothing. Then he noticed something in the corner of the nursery he had missed at first. A white folder resting on the rocking chair. Neatly placed. Intentionally placed. His stomach dropped. He approached it slowly, each step heavier than the last. A strange pressure filled his chest, like the air itself was tightening around him. He opened the folder with trembling fingers. Divorce papers, 2 inches thick. Professionally prepared. Signed by Hannah. On top of them sat a letter addressed in her handwriting, steady, calm, heartbreakingly composed. "James, by the time you read this, Liam and I are gone. We are safe. You will not find us. I know about Brooke. I know about your plan. I know everything you said about me, to her and to others. I know you intended to take my child and destroy me in court. You underestimated me. You underestimated the strength of a mother protecting her son. This is not a negotiation. This is the end." His vision blurred. His hands shook violently. He flipped the page. "I have copies of every message, every receipt, every threat. Michael has filed for temporary custody protection. By the time you attempt to take legal action, I will already be ahead of you. Do not contact me directly again. All communication will be through my attorney." And then the final line. "You broke our family long before I left. Now I'm saving what's left of it. Goodbye, Hannah." Something inside James cracked loud and vicious. He slammed the folder shut and hurled it across the room. Papers scattered like snow. His roar echoed off the walls. "This isn't happening," he growled. "She can't do this. She can't." He dialed her number straight to voicemail. He tried again. No answer. He called her mother, her old roommate, even her former co-workers. No leads. No trace. No Hannah. His fury turned feral. He marched to the building's front desk. "Pull the security footage," he ordered. But the doorman, who had always been polite to Hannah, looked him squarely in the eye and said, "Mr. Cole, the cameras on your floor were down for maintenance today. Nothing recorded." James's face drained of color. "Michael." He bolted back upstairs, grabbing his laptop, tearing through drawers, searching for anything that would tell him where she had gone. Nothing. Hannah hadn't run blindly. She had orchestrated an escape he never saw coming. And for the first time in his life, James Cole felt something he didn't even have a name for. Amarda. He wasn't in control. The woman he once dismissed as weak had outplayed him with precision. And as the reality sank in, his rage slowly morphed into something darker. Fear. James Cole wasn't used to losing. Not deals. Not arguments. Not control. But losing his wife and child in one calculated, silent stroke that hit him like a bullet he never saw coming. He spent the entire night pacing the apartment, tearing through drawers, overturning cabinets, checking every closet as if Hannah might magically reappear with the baby. By sunrise, the place looked like a burglary scene, papers shredded, furniture askew, rage hung thick in the air. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, precise taps. James yanked open the door, expecting police, maybe building security. Instead, a courier stood there holding a sealed envelope. "For Mr. James Cole," the man said. "Urgent legal delivery." James ripped it open before the door even closed. At the top of the document, "Emergency motion for temporary custody protection. Filed by Hannah Turner Cole. Represented by Attorney Michael Turner." His vision turned red. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "She can't do this." But she had. And legally, she'd drawn first blood. He called his attorney immediately. "Hannah filed something," he spat. Get to my place now." By 9 a.m., 3 high-powered lawyers from a Park Avenue firm were seated around his dining table, papers spread everywhere. The lead attorney, Pierce Halston, a man in his 50s with silver hair and the confidence of someone used to winning, read silently while James paced behind him. After 10 minutes, Halston closed the file, removed his glasses, and looked up. "This is substantial." "It's lies," James snapped. "All of it." Halston shook his head. "It's documentation, screenshots, medical records, audio transcripts, bank statements, receipts, photos. She's built a case that you're unfit, controlling, abusive, and morally compromised. That's insane. She's the unstable one." "James," Halston said slowly, "your wife didn't leave impulsively. She left with evidence. And planning. And legal backing." James slammed his fist on the table. "I'm the CEO. I built a multi-million-dollar company. I can outmaneuver a stay-at-home mom." Halston's expression tightened. "This stay-at-home mom has a brother who is a former corporate litigator with connections. He's weaponized the law against you." James felt heat crawl up his neck. "What do they have?" he demanded. Halston began reading from the file. Documented abandonment during medical emergencies. Absence during the birth. Financial manipulation, including cutting off her access to joint funds. Neglectful behavior. Potential investor fraud tied to company credit cards being used for hotel stays with a woman who is not your wife. James froze. "Brooke," Halston nodded grimly. "If opposing counsel subpoenas her, it will get ugly." "Brooke won't talk," James insisted. But even he didn't sound convinced. "And then there are the recordings," Halston added. James's stomach dropped. "What recordings?" Halston flipped to the transcript. "Your conversation on February 9th. The one where you told Brooke you were taking the baby. And Hannah was dead weight." James's knees nearly buckled. "How? How did she get that?" he whispered. Halston exhaled. "Mr. Cole, if your mistress recorded you and shared it with someone, willingly or not, this is devastating." James felt the room tilt. His empire, his image, wasn't just cracking, it was crumbling. Halston continued, "We can try to argue emotional distress on Hannah's part, but the judge will not overlook abandonment during childbirth, nor the preeclampsia, nor the emergency C-section." James's hands clenched into shaking fists. "She ambushed me," he growled. "No," Halston corrected. "She protected herself. And she did it legally." The words stung worse than any insult. James paced to the window, staring out at the Manhattan skyline, his skyline, the kingdom he believed he ruled. But now it looked distant, unreachable, like it belonged to someone else. "What are my chances?" he finally asked. Halston hesitated, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. "Right now?" "Very low." James swallowed hard, fury boiling beneath his ribs. No, he wouldn't let Hannah win. He wouldn't let Michael outsmart him. He wouldn't let the world see him fall. "We fight," James said, turning sharply. "I don't care what it costs." "We." Halston exchanged a look with the other attorneys, a look James didn't catch. "Very well," Halston said. "But understand this. The more we fight, the more the truth will come out." Truth. Such an inconvenient word. James lifted his chin, jaw locked. Then, let it. But deep inside, for the first time in his life, James feared the truth might bury him. The family court in Lower Manhattan didn't look intimidating from the outside. Gray stone walls, long steps, revolving doors. But inside, the air was thick with tension, secrets, and consequences. Lives changed in these rooms. Custody battles ended here. Reputations died here. And for James Cole, the moment he stepped through the double doors with his legal team flanking him like bodyguards, it felt like walking into a battlefield he hadn't fully prepared for. Cameras weren't allowed inside the courtroom, but whispers followed him down the hallway. People recognized him, the CEO from the business magazines, the tech wonder kind whose face had once symbolized success. Today, he felt their eyes like knives. The hearing was closed session. Only attorneys, the judge, and the parties involved were permitted. When Hannah entered, the room shifted. She wasn't the trembling woman James remembered. She wasn't the exhausted shell from the nursery, nor the fragile new mom he tried to break. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair neatly pinned back, her posture straight. Michael walked beside her, calm, protective, steady. Liam was with a certified child advocate in another room, safe, supervised. James stiffened. Hannah didn't look at him. Not once. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and silver hair, called them to order. "Mr. Cole," she said, scanning the documents before her. "You requested emergency custody based on alleged instability." Mrs. Cole has filed a motion asserting neglect, coercive control, and abandonment. Today, we will review the evidence. James lifted his chin, confident. "Your Honor, my wife is emotionally volatile. We will get to that," the judge cut in. "But first, Mrs. Cole's legal team will present." Pierce Halston shot James a warning glare, telling him, without words, to shut up. Michael stood, voice even. "Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate a pattern of emotional manipulation, negligence, and deliberate attempts to isolate my client from her support system." He opened a binder. It wasn't the messy evidence James expected. It was polished, organized, deadly. The first blow came fast. "Exhibit A," Michael said. "Messages between Mr. Cole and Ms. Brooks Sanders." James felt his stomach twist as enlarged screenshots appeared on the screen. "She's dead weight. Once Liam is with me, she'll have nothing. We'll have the perfect life once she's out of the picture. Just be patient." James's attorneys shifted uneasily. The judge's brows arched. Then came Exhibit B. The hotel receipts. Luxury suites charged to company accounts dated when Hannah was on hospital bed rest. Then, Exhibit C. Audio recordings. James's own voice filled the room. "I'm taking the baby. She won't stop me. She's too unstable to fight. She'll sign what I give her." "We." Whispers rippled through the small gallery of clerks and junior attorneys observing. James's face flushed. "These recordings. This is illegal." The judge didn't blink. "They were obtained in the marital home, where your wife has equal right to privacy. They are admissible." Michael wasn't finished. "Exhibit D," he said. Medical records documenting Hannah's preeclampsia, emergency C-section, and Mr. Cole's absence during the birth. A nurse testified via video call. She was alone, the nurse said. Her husband didn't arrive until hours later. James clenched his jaw. Then the door opened again. A new witness stepped in. A woman. Early 30s. Nervous hands. Eyes that triggered something buried in James's memory. Hannah turned slowly. James froze. It was Emily, his ex-girlfriend from 8 years ago. The one he'd controlled. Manipulated. Threatened. The one who had disappeared from his life overnight, just like Hannah. Emily swallowed hard. "Your Honor, I was called because I have a history with Mr. Cole. A history he told others never happened." James bolted upright. "This is irrelevant." The judge held up a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Cole. Let her speak." Emily's voice shook. "He isolated me from my family, controlled my accounts, told me I wasn't stable. I left him because I feared what he'd do if we ever had a child." A cold silence filled the room. James's attorneys looked sick. Michael delivered the final strike. "Your Honor, Mr. Cole's pattern is clear. The same behaviors, the same tactics, repeated years apart with 2 different women." The judge leaned back, assessing James with a gaze sharp enough to cut. "Mr. Cole," she said, "you have a documented history of coercive control, financial manipulation, and emotional abuse. Combined with your absence during critical medical events and your own recorded statements, this court sees substantial concern for the child's safety." Chanling. James's whole world tilted. "Therefore," the judge continued, "temporary sole custody is granted to Mrs. Cole. Mr. Cole will be given supervised visitation until further review." No, this is wrong." James sputtered. "This is justice," the judge replied coldly. And just like that, the man who thought he controlled everything realized he controlled nothing at all. The court ruling was supposed to be temporary, just a preliminary decision before the full custody battle. But for James Cole, it triggered a spiral he couldn't control, a landslide of consequences that reached far beyond family court. The moment the judge granted Hannah temporary sole custody, a crack split clean through the carefully manufactured image he'd spent years polishing. And that crack spread fast. By the time James stepped out of the courthouse, rage simmering under his skin. 2 reporters were already waiting. They weren't there for him. Specifically, family court wasn't exactly tabloid territory, but his face was recognizable. A rising tech CEO, a Manhattan success story, a man who'd shaken hands with investors on Wall Street and posed with venture capitalists on LinkedIn. "Mr. Cole, how do you respond to the allegations?" one reporter asked, holding a microphone close. James scoffed. "I have no comment," but the slight tremor in his voice said otherwise. That evening, whispers started circulating. A tech podcast posted a vague statement. Rumors of misconduct surrounding Cole Tech CEO James Cole. Then an investor tweeted something cryptic. "We evaluate leaders based on character as well as performance." Within hours, speculation brewed across business forums. And then the real blow landed. Michael had anticipated this moment. He wasn't just a brother defending his sister, he was a strategist. A former corporate litigator who knew exactly how reputations unraveled in the tech world. That night, a journalist from a major financial newspaper, an old colleague of Michael's, ran a piece titled, "Behind the Glass Walls. Allegations Surrounding CEO James Cole Shake Coltech's Stability." The article didn't mention Hannah's name. No details about the case, no mention of the baby, but it highlighted patterns of coercive behavior, ethical concerns, and possible misuse of investor funds for personal activities. One line stood out like a dagger under bright light. Sources confirmed that Mr. Cole may have used corporate credit for non-business-related hotel stays. Investors read that as affair. Boards read it as misconduct. Journalists read it as blood in the water. Over the next 48 hours, things got worse. Coltech's stock dipped 4%, then 8%, then 12%. Internal Slack channels went wild. Employees whispered in break rooms. Someone anonymously leaked a clip of James berating a subordinate. Someone else posted a blurred photo of him and Brooke at the bar weeks before. James stormed through his office, barking orders, slamming doors, demanding loyalty he had never earned. His assistant couldn't meet his eyes. His CFO avoided him entirely. The board requested an urgent meeting. Brooke tried to comfort him at first. "People are overreacting, James. This'll blow over. Try." But by the second day, even she pulled away. She stopped returning his texts, stopped picking up his calls. When she finally answered, her voice was cold. "I can't be associated with this right now," she whispered. "It's hurting my career." "You said you loved me," he snapped. She exhaled softly. "I said I cared about our future. But you're toxic right now. And honestly, maybe she was right about you." The line clicked dead. James stared at his phone, shock rippling through him. He had counted on Brooke. He had believed she would stand beside him when Hannah left. But now even she abandoned him. Just like Emily years ago. Just like everyone eventually did. By the third day, the board meeting commenced. 12 people sat around a long walnut table, Manhattan skyline stretching behind them like an audience witnessing his downfall. "James," the chairman began carefully, "we need to initiate an independent review of the allegations. Until then, we believe it's best if you step back from your role." James felt the floor tilt. "I built this company, and we're protecting it," the chairman replied. "This is temporary," another member said. "But your presence right now is damaging investor confidence." They voted. 10 in favor. 1 abstained. 1 James furiously opposed. But it didn't matter. He was suspended. He walked out of the boardroom, stripped of authority, stripped of respect, stripped of control. And when he returned to his penthouse that evening, the silence that greeted him felt different. It wasn't empty. It was accusatory. His empire was collapsing. His company slipping away. His mistress gone. His reputation wounded. His son protected. And his wife, the woman he once underestimated, was winning a war he never saw coming. James sank onto the floor of the empty nursery, head in his hands. For the first time in his life, he realized he might lose everything. The final custody hearing arrived on a crisp spring morning, the kind of morning that felt symbolic: new air, new light, new beginnings. Hannah stood outside the courthouse in a simple cream blouse and tailored black pants, Liam cradled in her arms, his tiny fingers wrapped around hers. Michael stood beside her, steady as always, a silent guardian who had never let her fall. Inside the courthouse, James waited with his attorneys. But gone was the polished CEO who once walked with unshakable confidence. His suit was still expensive, but his face carried the exhaustion of sleepless nights, the hollow panic of a man watching his empire burn. Coltech had announced his permanent removal just days earlier. His board released a statement about ethical misalignment. Investors pulled out. Clients withdrew contracts. And the whispers around Manhattan, quiet but sharp, confirmed what everyone suspected. James Cole was finished. The bailiff called the case. Hannah's heart thudded as she entered the courtroom. The judge looked at both sides with calm authority. "We are here to finalize custody and divorce proceedings between Hannah Turner Cole and James Cole." James leaned forward. "Your Honor," the judge raised a hand. "Mr. Cole, you will speak when addressed." He closed his mouth, jaw ticking. Michael stood. "Your Honor, we present the final evidence packet submitted last week, including expert evaluations, witness statements, and documentation of Mr. Cole's behavior." James's attorney tried to object, but even he sounded defeated. "Your Honor, we believe much of this has been exaggerated." "Exaggerated?" the judge repeated. "Mr. Cole, these are recordings of you threatening to take a newborn from his mother. Hotel invoices documenting infidelity during her medical crisis, financial manipulation, emotional coercion, and a documented abandonment during a dangerous childbirth." James swallowed hard. The judge continued, her voice sharp but controlled. "This court sees a clear pattern, not just of neglect, but of calculated harm." Hannah held Liam tighter. "Mrs. Cole," the judge said, turning toward her, "you have demonstrated stability, preparation, and unwavering commitment to your child's safety. Temporary custody has gone smoothly. The child is thriving in your care." "Show." Hannah nodded, eyes misting. The judge lifted the final document. "Therefore, effective immediately, sole physical and legal custody is awarded to Mrs. Cole. Mr. Cole will receive supervised visitation twice monthly, contingent on behavioral therapy and ongoing evaluations." James's breath punched out of him. "Your Honor, please. He's my son." The judge met his eyes. "Then you should have acted like a father. It was over. Final. Irreversible." "Just," Hannah exhaled, a long, trembling release of years of pain. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from relief, from victory, from the unmistakable feeling that she and Liam were finally free. James sank into his seat, defeated, small, his attorneys quietly gathering their folders. No sympathy remained in the room. No power, no control. When the hearing adjourned, Hannah stepped outside into the soft spring sunlight. For the first time in ages, the world felt wide open instead of suffocating. She lifted Liam and kissed his forehead. "You're safe," she whispered. "We're safe." As they walked down the courthouse steps, a familiar figure waited near a black SUV. Danielle Brooks, the attorney who had assisted Michael behind the scenes. Quiet, steady, respectful. The man who never once looked at her with judgment, only with kindness. He stepped forward. "I heard the ruling. Congratulations, Hannah." Paul, his smile was warm, gentle, in a way she had forgotten men could be. She felt something soften inside her. "Thank you," she said shyly. He nodded toward Liam. "He's lucky to have you." Hannah's cheeks warmed. "I'm the lucky one." Daniel cleared his throat. "Listen, when you're ready, no pressure at all. I'd like to take you and Liam to dinner. To celebrate. Only if you feel comfortable." Michael shot her a teasing look. "He's a good guy, Hannah." Joel, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real hope. Not the fragile illusion she once forced herself to cling to. "I'd like that," she said softly. Daniel's smile widened, sincere and bright. "Then we'll make it happen." As Hannah held Liam close, the breeze rustled her hair, carrying away the last remnants of her old life. She wasn't Hannah Cole anymore. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't a prisoner in a glass-walled penthouse. She was a mother. She was free. She was beginning again. And as she walked toward the future with her brother by her side, her son in her arms, and someone new waiting patiently, she felt something pure and powerful bloom in her chest. Peace, hope, and justice. So, our story has come to an end. And if you're still here with me right now, My wonderful friends, it means something in this journey has touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it reminded you of your own battles. Maybe it whispered that you, too, deserve safety, dignity, and a life where you're genuinely loved. Hannah's journey shows us one simple truth. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to walk away from what's destroying you. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Real strength comes from within, and that inner strength is what saved her. It's what can save any of us. Life will hand us people who underestimate us, betray us, or try to break us, but we are not defined by their cruelty. We are defined by the moment we choose ourselves, choose peace, and choose healing. If this story gave you courage, clarity, or even a moment of comfort, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach the hearts that need them most. And remember, I'm here, walking this journey with you. Always.